Two. Hi, my name is Paul Brighton, aka Sifu Boggie, and welcome to this ongoing show, The Way of Mindful Consciousness, a show of mind, body, and spirit, a mixture between spirituality and science, and basically getting to know someone's way, their path, their balance, their Tao. So, this week we have the very great, the very wonderful Tony Mills. So, it is The Way of Tony Mills. As always, I have my ever so gracious, ever so awesome co-host, Ethan Collins.
Hi!
That's Ethan. And, of course, now for the show today, we have Tony Mills. So, quite simply, quite maybe bluntly, Tony, tell us what is your story? Who are you? What do you do?
Right, I am Tony Mills. That's what I was born anyway. I've been, yes, I think I was. Yes, I was. I think I can start my journey halfway through my life as what you're interested in, and perhaps the public are interested in, is that I started studying all kinds of things like astrology, hand reading, all these things, because I was fascinated by people and myself, okay? Because I am part of this community. I got to a stage where I wanted to kind of apply it a bit more, and studied massage, kinesiology, Reiki, and I became an osteopath, and which was great, and it worked wonderfully. However, I got to a stage where I found I was manipulating people. They would feel great, but then they'd be back again 3 months, 6 months. Then off I go again. They said, well, that was great. Thank you very much. Then another 3 months and 6 months, they're back again. So perhaps they could have carried on for the rest of their life being manipulated, but nothing actually changing within them. For me, there was this, I kept on asking why. When you keep on asking why, you're going to get somewhere. It may not get the ultimate, but, okay. So I realized that I could actually douse the spine with divining rods, find out each section of the spine is saying, energetically feed an energy. While they say a command, then the spine would correct itself. Because what I was dealing with is actually the program that was causing the dysfunction in the spine. So I suppose when I was an osteopath, I was more of a mechanic. Now I'm a krypton tuner. Okay, so I actually find the program within, which is the most important. We think this bad back, this neck problem, or this liver problem is the end of the world for us. But actually, it's the program that triggers symptom or whatever. So the body is the end of the line as regards what's happening to you truly inside, what is blocking your progress. And whatever pain you're receiving physically is always a reflection of some emotional or mental pain initially. And I found that I could, the cause of the problem, of the dysfunction, think of all kinds of complicated medical names. It really doesn't matter, because what does it make you feel? You know, someone's a pain in the neck or someone's a pain in the butt is as literal as that. You know, sick to the stomach, can't stand it. You know, all these things are so amazingly literal. And when we start working on that, things start changing. I suppose the shame is when we were babies, we didn't have a workshop manual to come along with us. We've got one for the washing machine. Now, the main reason for that, of course, is that the car and washing machine doesn't have to learn a damn thing, okay? But we do. So all these programs that run through us come from our higher self, trying to communicate something within us that is much more important than the end result. It's tried in other ways before the physical conditions, but it hasn't got anywhere. And I think it's a bit unfair, really, as if we're supposed to know. 1,000 years ago, or if you saw the shaman in the jungle, you get all information. But now with technology especially, it tends to dampen and control everything, as you can guess. So I can cut through all this programming and find out what is actually presented. Much of this comes from when we were children, of course, because we had very often two computer operators working on this little computer. Okay, unfortunately, is in these computers, and we live the viruses. We could read our parents' faces like a farmer can read the clouds with the weather. That's how amazing we are. However, we carry them then. You know there's something not quite right inside you, but what it is the program, it's the virus running inside you. So our purpose in life is to find our true self, with being a person. But the programs may give you something completely different. And we're here to grow beyond the programs, which can be very difficult, of course, and very challenging. So the spine is really good because it innervates the whole body. Checking the spine, I can get so much information and also work on it, not just receive the information. I can actually work on that information and feed in an energy. The energy comes from, well, I was a bit of a reluctant to receive. I have got a guide, and because I'm a man and it's a Native American, I kept it down a bit because, you know, everyone says they got a Native American guide. So I just kind of kept it quiet. All this energy was coming through me all the time and amazing things were happening. But I thought, well, I'll just keep that quiet for a bit. Begin to see this guide and see and you could see him standing behind me, you see, and working on them. And so it came to a head when I was living in Mallorca for a bit, and there's an artist. I was working on this artist, and she saw this guide behind me, and she'd painted it. You see. Now that's interesting. I begin to take notice now, really, and so I said, "I tell you what, I'll do some automatic writing." I wrote this name, Ha or Ta, and I thought, well, that's a weird name for a start, no? And I thought, well, okay, I'll Google it. So I Google it, and here up comes this Native American name, you see. And so I thought, looks like I'll have to accept this one. The funny thing really is that, you know, if it's like, say, angels, okay? Now then, what do angels do without human beings? They're twiddling their thumbs. They're twiddling their thumbs.
Yeah.
Because we are the means of communication, you know. What does a driver do without a car, you know?
Totally.
And it's the same with the same with guides. What do guides do without anyone to work through? You see, I always think in reverse with these things. So I had to accept it. And when it really came to a head, I lived in Mallorca for a bit, and I did a meditation, which I'm not a great meditator, to be perfectly honest. I was among about 30 women, and this lady said, "Sit down now and connect with your guide." And I was kind of, yeah, okay, kind of accepting. After just a short while, immediately, he was standing in front of me, and he just walked into me. And I just cried, you see, and I women there, and the man crying was a kind of embarrassing. It's usually the other way around with me, so it kind of knocked my ego for a bit. But I just cried, and I could see the whole camp. I could see smoke up and children running, and it was just amazing. So I've been a kind of reluctant receiver of all this, but it's all the energy when I work in workshops, this is the guide that working through me, you see, this is the thing. So I could work with a workshop with many people, and all I need is a few people with the same section of spine. I could work on them all together, and things would change on just a few people together. And then I thought, right, well, why just a spine? So I looked for other programs which have feelings. You see, the feelings are our guide. Is actually this is their motor through life, is the feelings. I found the meridians have feelings, believe it or not, and these are the things that if there's a blockage in the meridians, there's a blockage in feelings, so things are not circulating. Also, the chakras, we look at crystals and we look at color, are amazing. There are themes in all the chakras are themes. So you work on that theme and things start changing. And so these are the things I've kind of followed and worked with. Now, this is all very well, but where people wanted me to teach them then, and I said, well, I'm not sure if I can, really. How? You know, how do you teach when you've got a guide coming through? Anyway, I was living in London, and it's the early hours of the morning. I don't know if you've had a waking dream, but this was really what a waking dream. My eyes were wide open, and I saw this image like a pebble in a pool, just drifting down through the water. And so I got up and I drew it. I didn't know what it's for. And then I came across a book called Feelings Buried Alive, Never Die. Okay. Tell me if I'm going on a bit too much.
No. I'm rapidly interested. Usually I interrupt and try and insert something interesting, but I'm rapidly curious.
Okay.
So please continue.
Right, sure. So, and I put these both, I actually got this device made, and this is called a living lens, okay? And it's a flat disc, and this is the way it works, okay? If, say, someone had done something terrible to my family or myself, I'd be full of rage and resentment. However, I'm a really nice guy, okay? So I'm not going to express that, of course. And if you muscle tested me, if I put my arm up and said rage, I'd go weak. If I said resentment, I'd go weak, okay? Not only that, I'd blackmail myself because I'm a really nice guy. If anyone if anyone hears I got rage and resentment, I'm in for trouble. So,
you shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't be that way. You're a nice guy.
I'm a nice guy. You got it.
Yeah.
Nice guy. So what do I do? What do you do with a blackmailer? You own it, okay? So now, not only that, now then, my higher self has kicked in here, and he says, you know, Tony, you're carrying this rage and resentment, and you're keeping it in. Emotion hurts you, okay? Any hidden emotion will hurt you. So, right. My gallbladder starts playing up. Oh my God, this is terrible. And it goes on and on. I have no idea. So I go to the hospital and says, I'll take it out. I don't want this. You know, really, it's just excess here because it's only giving me pain. I can live without it. Okay. That's my thought at the time. However, rage and resentment says, right, now where can we, now we can always go to the liver. That's pretty good. And the heart's pretty good for a bit of anger as well. So what you do with a blackmailer, you own it. So by holding this device and saying, I feel weakened by rage and resentment until I get a signal from my body, I put it in the other hand, I feel weakened by rage and resentment until I get a signal from the body. You test my muscle. Rage is now no longer weakening me. Resentment's no longer weakening me. Not only that, my gallbladder says, oh, I'm off for a holiday now. I don't need to do anything.
It's fantastic.
And that's how it works. We complicate life no end. It simply goes there. You could put it another way, is that there's a captain of a ship. of the crew. Okay, so the captain has not been too well. Okay, and so while he's not been too well, the ship's gone in hell of a state. You know, because the crew do exactly as he said: steer north-northwest. You know, they've got to do it. He's got better. He's been fixed. Okay, he comes back and he noticed the ship's in hell of a state. So he tells the crew, "There's trouble with the engine room." Oh, what? Trouble with the engine room? Right, let's fix it. Okay. Trouble with the steering gear. Okay, fix it. And this is what this living lens does. You're telling your body, you know, you got problems there. Oh, really? Okay, I'll fix it. Okay. Because the crew have gone according to my beliefs before that this is wrong and it hurts. Now that's all altering. So it doesn't need to hurt me anymore. That I feel better in my life. And that's the whole purpose, is to have a kind of contentment and joy. You know, it's not just to come out of a hole, but it's to climb a mountain. But my purpose is to get people out of holes first, of course. You've got the choice of climbing the mountain. You know, you can stay on the plane if you want to.
It's funny how... Oh, sorry, Tony. I was just going to say, it's funny how in the West, like you say, in the West, we don't get that manual. We don't get that information. There's lots of things that... I had Eastern teachers, and the Eastern teachers took what you know and understand about the body and how it communicates. They took it as a matter of fact. And I'm not saying that everyone everywhere in the East, China, knows this, but especially the shamans. The whole point of the shamans they knew how to talk to you, or they knew how to talk to your body, and that your body, the Taoist concept is the body is alive. It is literally everything is alive. Everything is technically you, but everything has a conscious state. And also in what's like Chinese Oriental diagnosis, the whole point of a lot of the Eastern side or the Chinese side is that when you diagnose something, you're actually treating it at the same time, but everything works on a whole. So tension in the neck, tension in the body, tension, it has a metaphor. It's not just that you're ill there, it's a metaphor.
True.
So yeah. Sorry, please continue.
No, it's good. It's good. Yeah, exactly. No, I do believe in Taoist way completely, 100%.
Yeah.
And see ourselves as a body only. That is our snag, I'm afraid. But this body is just a rep. Okay, it's just a rep in this lifetime to transmit what it needs to be learned from this soul as it passes through. Next lifetime, if you haven't done anything with it, you may have to go over it again. And that's our progress, you see. We're an ever-evolving body in different forms, but the main one, who is I, is that it's our soul, it's our higher self. And that's the amazing part. And when we realize, then we completely align with our soul, then it's amazing. You know, we've got all the tools for it. It's just our beliefs, other people's beliefs, take us back, I'm afraid. But the clues are actually in the body. That's the beauty of it. It's got all the clues to what we feel in our body. So useful, you know.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I have had personal experiences with that where I'll be ignoring my body's needs in my neck. Oh, my neck will start hurting so fierce because the channel between my consciousness and the rest of my body is being blocked by a preconceived concept that I'm trying to force on my body. And my body's going, no, we need to rest now. And I'm going, but I need to do this. I have this preconceived concept. This has to be done. And my body's going, hey, it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
And I've ignored it until I couldn't really move my neck, couldn't turn my head. You know, or a couple of years ago, I was having problems with feeling safe. So I had all of these root chakra issues manifest. And I've had that through my entire life. I wet my bed till I was 8. That's because I was so scared as a child that I was so out of touch with my body that I couldn't wake up because it was so painful for me to be in my body. There's 4 different defense mechanisms. I don't know if you've ever read any books by Barbara Brennan. She wrote Light Emerging and Healing Hands of Light, I believe, are her 2 books. She talks about the 4 major defense systems that people have. One of them is, I can't remember the names, but one of them is to actually flee your body. Your consciousness just straight up runs away from your body to escape the unpleasant situation that's happening. And I've seen those sorts of people. And those sorts of people usually have a lot of physical illnesses that manifest because they're in that consciousness of running away from their body. And that also reminds me of another thing that was in a great book called Holographic Universe. I highly recommend everyone read it. It's by a fellow named Michael Talbot, who's a physicist and a psychic. So it's really well balanced. It's a really nice representation. And he documents in there about the body's relationship to the mind and case studies of like guys having like feet of their intestines removed and during the surgery them saying, I just can't swallow what's going on in my life right now.
Yeah, right, great. Yeah.
You know, or stuff like that, because the body, I think there's a great book called Your Body Speaks Your Mind. It was a New York Times bestseller for a while, and also Louise Hay is also a great.
Yeah. There's this whole thing. Sorry, I'll very quickly say there's this whole thing in NLP, which is like in the West, neuro-linguistic programming. Sorry, neuro-linguistic. Yeah, thank you. That one. And the whole point is, or the Taoist concept, they say the same. A lot of the information came from the Taoist thing as well. But is this the words you use are actually hinting to situations? And the whole thing with NLP is, if somebody, for example, somebody is very musical, by using words that, oh, you know, this sounds like a good idea, or this is music to your ears, or can you, using metaphors of a musical quality, of somebody's very mechanical, the mechanic, using mechanical metaphors, you help that person tune in to what you're saying, so they're more likely to learn it, to actually understand it. But that works in health. That works exactly the same way. And there was this thing, going right back to the very beginning, about when you first come into the world and you have 2 technicians, which happen to be your parents. It's interesting how, I don't think we were off topic if I say this, but it's interesting how, in the West, I've found, I spent some time in China, even spent Russia, Philippines, Thailand, yada, yada, yada. And I found it very interesting looking back on my own childhood and looking at some people. And then when my daughter was born, this was really interesting, where, for example, we've got a big thing, or the Western culture, we've got this big thing about if children are talking to imaginary friends, to try to dispel that. Oh, you shouldn't. And my grandparents were doing this with my daughter, and I had to actually step in and say, no, actually, no, that's fine, it's fine. And but she'll be crazy. And said, well, yeah, once upon a time that was normal, to talk. And the whole thing is, the way I expressed it to my parents were very conservative, and the way I expressed it to my parents was, it's funny, as a child has an imaginary friend, but people pay to see a medium who's talking to their imaginary friends. So how is it, and the biggest thing for me is people always say, oh, you talk to kids in a weird way. And so, well, kids are adults. They're child adults. Yeah, it's no different to talking to somebody who doesn't know English very well. It doesn't mean, which used to be an old British thing, it doesn't mean you have to talk louder and slower for them to understand what you're saying. It's about
that's not a British thing. That's a universal thing, at least in America.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because we've got this weird thing of, I know if I talk loud, but this is the ego. You go into psychology. This is actually what your ego does to yourself, and what we sort of talked about. What Q does, Ethan does, and he creates clothes. And one of the hoodies that he's making for me is it's going to have monkey mind, also monkey, as in an actual monkey, but It's actually based on Tripitaka and the monkey story. So those in England might remember monkey magic. So monkey's on one shoulder and Buddha thought will be on the other. Now, that was translated into the movies, into the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other. And the whole point they're actually talking about is the consciousness, your higher self, and also your ego. And one thing I learnt from the East, and it took a long time for me to realise that this is, the sacred knowledge. This is the knowledge that eventually you realise that people talk about their higher selves and talk about ego, and the thing they sometimes forget, and this is what this actually is hinting about, one of the many things this is hinting about, is the ego. The ego is, well, it depends which way you want to represent it, but the ego is one side, so let's call it the yang. The intuition is the other, and you sit in the middle. You are this line in the middle. So you listen to both. Both of them, or in the East, in Taoism, they call it the advisors. And they actually, eventually, when you go into the like shaman side or the barefoot doctor side in Taoism, they talk about the organs being your advisors. So where you were saying about listening to this, and this, they tell you stuff through how they work, whether they're overworking, underworking, and you're meant to know that you're meant to tune into them. So you tune into your heart. What is your heart telling you? Now in in the barefoot doctor side, there are 5 elements, and the heart represents fire, and it's heart and small or upper intestines, depending who taught you the words. And so they will tell you stuff like your kidneys, which is water, kidneys, and gallbladder. Bladder. They will tell you stuff. Your wood, so the liver and gallbladder, and so on and so forth. Each in the barefoot doctor side, which very much likes the 5, what's called the 5 elements, but then the 5 spirits, the 5 actions, and 5 is their sort of key philosophical number. Well, one of them. So it's very much about these organs will tell you stuff if you're listening. Dragon Dog, Shaman do it far more. They understand that knowledge and they respect that knowledge, but they sort of do it far more vibrationally wise, far more. I find for me, or at least the Taoism I learned, is almost like spiritual science. There is a scientific about cause and effect. They're very much about cause and effect, but at the same time, it's about feeling, it's about energy, it's about tuning into that information.
It's the duality that's present in all things. It's like people think that math can't be sacred. Sure, God has to have a mathematical formula for building everything. Yeah. It doesn't downplay the significance of this other side of the spiritual at all. To me, I'll explain here. I was homeschooled. I'm autistic and dyslexic. I never went through the American schooling system. I just skipped it.
That's a big advantage.
Oh, it is. It's a huge advantage. I've seen it through my entire life. I grew up following my bliss. So I was specifically trained to follow whatever I'm interested in. So as a result, I have a much easier time shooing all those other things out of the way. So where I was going with this, it was going to be good though. I'm sure it was.
about mathematical side of things.
Oh yeah, mathematical. So for science, thank you. So for me, a long time, I couldn't, in my consciousness, science and math could not, science and spirit could not exist simultaneously. Because to me, science was murdering spirituality to a certain extent. And then I came to the conclusion that ultimately, as long as you don't get lost in the pure science of it, science is just explaining how spirit works. It doesn't it doesn't detract for me from the magic, and it did at a certain point. And this is a comment on my state of consciousness at the time. Knowing how wind worked detracted from the magic of the wind, because I've always found wind to be extremely magical thing and an extremely magical concept. So science murdered that for me for a while. And I think that's one of the things that we see really prevalent in our society is this worshiping of science instead of recognizing science as a brick in the wall. You don't look at the brick to appreciate the wall. There's a really great Taoist saying about when you see a painting, don't look at the paintbrushes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what it is. So, you know, science is really helpful. It's really helped me a lot to learn about how my body works, about healing my body, about my internal chemistry, my pH, my nervous systems, how they interact with each other. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to do Qigong because it's spiritual. And I know that all the science stuff that it's doing for me, but the spiritual key is really what needs to be taken away. So understanding the science is just understanding both sides of the coin. You know, the right wing, the left wing, it's the same bird.
Yeah. It's all, you know, this is very Taoist, but it's all to do with balance. And it takes us back to balance continually. And there's no right or wrong. It's just understanding. And that's what we're here for. I mean, my brother in the States, he's a geophysicist, but he reads, you know, which you would not, if I worked with him, I don't think he'd quite accept what I do, but he's reading all these things like Harry Potter and things like that. And what is this interest in Harry Potter? People love magic. Life is magical. And that's what we need. It's good to go into, because this is what, like you were saying, Paul, is about children. They see the magic in life, and it's being cut off. And that's, magic is joy. Side, even if healing is the amazing thing. We are magicians if we only realized it.
Absolutely. That, and I definitely think that gets into Joseph Campbell's work and the hero's journey, and how we all need that recognition of the hero's journey in our lives. I think that's why films like Harry Potter and Star Wars are so popular, is because there's no mythology being taught anymore. So these are the new forms of mythology. These are the new forms of escapism that people need to be able to recognize their potential. To be, as a child who grew up fantasizing about Star Wars, I was a Star Wars nerd when I was a kid. I still got like 70 figures from the early 90s when I was growing up. And
I have a lightsaber.
Oh yeah, totally. And ultimately what that did was that's like a safe haven for that creativity, for that consciousness, because the rest of the world isn't going to try and murder it out of you if you're hiding it inside a film. If you're hiding your sense of wonder and joy and expansive learning that comes from myths, but you're hiding it inside Star Wars, then it makes it socially acceptable for you to explore those myths, to explore that side of yourself, to maybe admit to yourself on a certain level that magic is real, even though you have all of these viruses that are trying to crush it out of you, because awake people don't make very good slaves. That, you know, and the great machine of life, cogs aren't made by real human beings, so you got to try and shape them somehow. So you find this expansive quality and this genuine human experience being manifested through these films, and that's why it's so popular and so prevalent and so many people love them so much, is because it's feeding that part of themselves that they're not open to acknowledging it exists, that needs to be fed and loved and nurtured, and has been systematically crushed out of our society for a long time. And also, what were you going to say?
Sorry.
No,
there's a fear. You see, the thing is, the big machine you're talking, we all know what the big machines are. That's the advantage of being autistic. You're not brainwashable.
Yeah.
That is an advantage. And it also, you can't put your finger on magic, you see. You can put your finger on something organized and set. You know, what do you want to be, a sheep or a goat? You know, that's what we're here for, is to be something a bit different.
Yeah, totally.
Well, the whole point, there's a couple there, but, you know, this is the thing about, you know, we've put this thing in the box, and when I say thing in the box, we've labelled people who don't automatically follow the rules or say, hold up a minute, I'm not sure about this. We have called dyslexic, dyspraxic. You know, I'm 46. I came, when I left school, they said I'm slow, I would never really pick things up, I went off to be a baker, but I would never have I could never go to college or anything like that. I did at the time. See, I don't know, Ethan, if you have it in the States. Open University. I did the original, like the old you would see the lecturer a couple of times a year, and it was all the book stuff before the computers. And through that, I did psychology. I did Eastern philosophy. I did theology, all up to like a master level, because I was learning the way I found how I learn. I remember at school, again, let's say I'm 46, I remember at school naturally doing spider diagrams. Like you draw a circle, put something in the center, let's say music, and then you link off to that, things that connect with a subject or even the side derivatives. And the whole point is I was naturally doing that at school, and I was getting detentions and being held back because at the time that was considered doodling and not learning. Now, and then one of the other things, because I when I left school, around 18, 19, what was at the time called advanced learning techniques, and you had people like, is it Tony Buzzin?
Buzzin. B-U-Z-A-N.
Yeah, that's it.
Mind game.
And he was the beginning. He was the founder of the whole. Of course, in China they were doing it anyway, but that's another question, or another statement. The whole point was he was saying, well, actually, this, and this, but it goes back to like speed reading, where you actually have either a pen or like a chopstick I use, and you scan the words in front, because your brain actually picks up words far faster than most people read. And if you actually just allow your brain to actually scan the words and you scan the whole page, you will actually, in one setting, you will pick up far more information than you would actually retain by reading the whole page at normal sound speed. But this was this thing. As a child, you use your finger, and then at some point you get told to stop using your finger. The whole point is the education system actually de-educates in a way. It was very I say it's very controversial. I worked in private schools teaching Qigong, and I noticed that private schools focus far more on these, on the whole, how the brain works, how we learn, and did far more of these, say, holistic ways. One of the most interesting things, or one of the things I always say, if people say about the education system, I say we in the West have a big thing about Plato. Plato is the founder of modern society, but and it's a big thing, and that's awesome. But we don't teach as Plato taught. Plato's way of teaching was you were in a circle. You didn't have the teacher in the front of the class, and everybody else listened, obeyed to what the teacher said. The Plato way of learning, you had a circle. You sat in a circle, and not necessarily the teacher, but the teacher would say, "What do you know about this?" And then everybody would put in their information. And then he said, "Did you know this relates to this, or did you know also this?" And they would slowly mix in this big cooking pot of knowledge the information. So we make this big thing about certain people, like, Plato is the modern philosopher of the Western world, and he's the pillar of society. Yet we don't listen to that pillar's information. We choose to deprogram certain things, and I think, like I said, I wasn't homeschooled, but my education started when I left school. I fortunately for me, like starting at 12, I did the martial arts, and Eastern martial arts is actually very little about fighting and far more about understanding who you are. But again, in the West, we de-educate people to think, oh, it just means this. We haven't. I do say this thing about the West and the East, and nowadays the East is as bad in certain areas, in the city areas. But we do have this thing in modern day society. We have this thing of sticking things in boxes. This is this. This is that. And like the whole thing, like we're talking, well, the whole way of Tony Mills is that you know, your body talks to you all the time, and the Eastern theory is the only reason you actually get ill, the only reason you actually have accidents in the Eastern philosophy is because you're not listening. Because it starts as whispers, and Ethan's got this beautiful saying he says, and I'll let him say it in a minute when I shut up. He got that the universe whispers to you all the time. The Buddha mind, consciousness, it whispers. When you're only listening to the ego, which shouts, then you have to hear everything at high volume. But when you quiet, so the whole idea of meditation and meditate very, very quickly. You said about you don't like meditation, or you struggled with it. Meditation is anything. Reading a book is meditation. Going for a walk in the park, riding a bike, fishing. Meditation, in the psychology of it, meditation purely means focus on one thing and forget everything else. Or it's either you focus on one thing or you're opening up to the emptiness. And I also just wanted to quickly say, I know I use the word Taoist a lot. Tao simply means the way, the path, or the balance. One of those three. You can mix it about. But American Indians, they're Taoists. The Inuits, the Taoists. The Aborigines, the Taoists. Anyone who listens as much to their own body as well as they do to the society, as well as they do to nature itself. People who listen and go according to that nature are Taoists. So the American Indians, they would move, certain tribes would move from place to place during the seasons. They were natural nomads because that is a Taoist path. You follow your environment. We, the modern society, we said, no, we're going to stay exactly here. We're going to eat bananas, which are actually a fruit for the summer. We're going to eat bananas in the middle of winter. We're going to have salads on Christmas Day. We are going to control our environment, which is fine, but the environment will eventually control you. You know, you can do whatever you want in this world, as long as you're willing to pay the price. Well, you pay the price whether you want to or not, but by accepting it and by understanding this principle, you can actually live more harmoniously, more to your path, to your way, to your Tao. But anyway, what do I know? So,
okay, my turn.
Yeah. Your turn.
I wanted to add something really quick when we were talking about society and the way society does things. I was reading a Joseph Campbell book. Those of you who are not familiar with Joseph Campbell, he's an amazing man who wrote a lot of things about myths and personal myths and how myths relate to humans, and I recommend all of his works. I was just reading one of his books not that long ago. He was pointing out how the situation of religion has changed, because if you look back in religion of the churches, this is touching on the whole Plato and stealing concepts without actually embodying the whole consciousness that lives behind it, which Christians are a big fan of doing. So the priest in the church, it used to be the priest was at the head of the group facing away from the group. So he was the group, the human representation of the group talking to God, spirit, whatever you want to call it. Now the priest stands and faces the congregation. The priest is no longer the human's representation of God. He is now God's representation on earth. Which is a totally different mentality, totally different place to come from, totally different position of power to be representing, because that ultimately gives you power over other people. That gives you the ability of being right and them the ability of being wrong. There's a really amazing book called Nonviolent Communication. I talk about it every show, by Marshall Rosenberg. Man is amazing. And he points out how in our society, in Western society, and many societies in general, we are trained to see someone, if we can make someone bad, then that means we can punish them. And if you can punish someone for being bad, that makes you good. And all it takes is a nice little story in your brain about how what that person is doing is wrong to justify a world of pain, a world of hurt, a world of punishment that you not only feel good about dealing out, but you feel justified in dealing out because this other person is wrong. When really there is no right and wrong. If you really want to boil it down, there's optimal and there's suboptimal. And that's all we can really say. I mean, I can say that eating McDonald's is suboptimal for me. It will kill me if I eat it for a week straight, I'm sure, because I have a really sensitive digestive tract. But ultimately, that's a judgment that I'm placing on it, because ultimately it's just suboptimal for my body. The same as drinking gasoline would be suboptimal for my body.
It made you go faster.
Yeah, totally, yeah. So ultimately, when it comes to right and wrong and good and bad and all of that sort of stuff, they're all just concepts that we have. And touching back on the whole language thing, I recently ended a relationship I was in for 8 years with a very lovely lady who has my stepdaughter is now 11. I came into her life when she was about 3. And teaching these theories to her was very, very important to me. And I actually just had an amazing daddy moment about a week ago where I was talking to her about something and she caught herself saying should. And she changed and she corrected it. At 11 years old, she caught herself saying a should and corrected it. And I did one of those, yeah, you know, because because it was very important to me when she was growing up that she did not grow up with a blaming consciousness, where she did not give away her personal power. Because that's something else that happens when you allow other people, if you think that other people control how you feel, God, that's a scary place to be in. If you don't have control over your emotions, if you don't recognize that you're responsible for your emotional reaction, that means everybody can have control over you. And how powerless. I know I personally felt very powerless when I used to feel this way. That I was like the world can control how I feel. Oh crap, I have no control over my life. And that ultimately leads to lack of grounding, and then people try and get grounded, so they do something like eat food to try and bring the feeling back into their body, into their digestive tract, into their grounding chakras, and then you end up with a nation full of fat people, or nations full of fat people. I'm done with that rant. Okay, somebody else's turn.
No, it's going back to control. I mean, anger is only the fact you can't control something or someone. Anger comes from, you know, and people get very angry because they're slow in a queue or a car. It's because they can't control it. That's the situation, and that's where anger comes up.
Totally.
And also we're very tribal, aren't we? You know, and it's you know, and that's still that old belief: if you leave the tribe, you're in for trouble. So it doesn't matter if you're in the Hells Angels or Women's Institute. If you leave that tribe, you're going to be a bad person.
Yeah, totally. Because of that acceptance, that need that we all have to be accepted by the tribe around us. But now the tribe's gotten all weird and crazy, and the tribe's like split up all over the world, but there's still a little tribe around you, but there's still this I think is really interesting about Facebook is that, you know, my understanding, this is my understanding of it, to be able to reach full psychic ability, you have to have nothing to hide from the world. You don't need to feel unsafe because you're so okay with your consciousness and anything that manifests in your consciousness. Now, I'm a firm believer in all of life that unconscious people do are ultimately trying to manifest their unmet needs that they're not conscious they have. So to me, the internet is the Akashic Records, is the collective unconscious that 95% of the civilized people in the world can no longer access, but they have this deep need that they don't understand to make this happen. You look at Facebook, and I just came to this realization within the last couple of months. You look at Facebook, everyone is trying to share their lives with the world. Why? Because that is our natural conscious state, to be open and loving and share ourselves to the world. This is just how it's manifesting in this kind of screwy way. And even down, one of the first things I noticed was clockwise and counterclockwise when I started doing Qigong. There's a natural energy flow of clockwise, and it's not quite the same going the other directions. So to me, humans, well, we have to pick which way this watch is going to go. So the more natural direction is the direction that we chose. Of course they weren't. I would be shocked if they were conscious of it at the time. But how you see these innate human needs that we all have for the greater spiritual purpose to be manifest. And you see it also in like forms of sacred play. Why are video games so popular? Because it allows play in a safe environment where you are physically safe and you know that you are not in danger. That's also the flip side of the coin is sacred violence. That's why you see people being attracted to this form of violence, why people are drawn to fights, why people are drawn to that exchange of energy, to that conflict. And another really profound thing that I'll say this and then I'll shut up, is about the upping. It's been upping. All of the doses have been upping, whether that's the stress in movies. I mean, you're old enough to remember, and I grew up watching older shows, so I like a lot of older shows. Like a great example in the BBC is Are You Being Served?
Yeah.
You look at the style of humor in Are You Being Served, and then you compare it to a Britcom today. I enjoy Britcoms a lot. The humor in Are You Being Served, they end the joke, they imply something awkward's about to happen, and they end it. So there's no, so you get that like slight buildup of like, oh, this is going to be uncomfortable, and then it ends. Now they drag it on and on and on and just leave you sitting in that emotional agony of the joke itself. And you see that with horror movies. You see that with drugs, caffeine. Marijuana is becoming much stronger. I've heard cigarettes are getting stronger. The sugar amount in things is being upped as well. All of these doses are having to be upped because as people are shutting their consciousness down more, you've got to have something to activate the parasympathetic nervous system to wake them up. So you've got sex, you've got drugs, you've got coffee, you've got cigarettes. And that's what our society, alcohol, those are the things that our society is based on. I exercise religiously, and I find it amazing that if I say I'm sore from a workout, people will give me shit. Oh, you did that yourself. But if I don't drink anymore, but when I used to drink, I could say I have a hangover and I would get empathy for that. You can get empathy for poisoning yourself because it's societally acceptable. But like 8% of the US population exercises. So if you're in the exercising community, you're talking to someone outside of that community, you're going to get flipped shit for doing something that was expansive and strengthening and to stimulate growth, but you can get empathy for poisoning yourself.
Yeah, good point. That's a really good point. I think that's very good, Ethan. You see, the point is that people, it shows people up. You see, this is the problem. Say you've got a group of ladies they're going to say, right, we're going to lose weight. Okay, let's do it together. Okay, and so they work on it, but one by one, we can get back onto the cakes and things like that. But one lady is left, and they'll do their best to get that lady, have a cream cake. They'll come over here.
Absolutely. Because then it justifies them not holding themselves up to their standard because they don't have someone looking them in the eye going, well, why aren't you doing this? Because I can do it.
Well, it's that whole society thing. It's that thing of, you have these groups, or used to get it all the time in ice skating. And what I mean by that is that I'd go ice skating. I work as well in a group as I do as an individual. I used to be a baker, and night shift bakers tend to work on their own. And I've also been a chef, and chefs tend to work all together. So, and I work pretty well in both. And so I originally, when we first, ironically, I was sort of pushed into ice skating with my friends because they were really much into it, and I was more into my martial arts and healing, and they got pushed, and I went, and it all flipped because for me, ice skating sort of became my stage. It was very much like someone. My real name is Paul Brighton. Most people know me as Boggie. Boggie itself means, it's a Korean word from my teacher. Boggie means the balance between chaos and calmness. It's actually, in essence, it's a Korean version of Tai Chi. It means the guide, the person who can juggle the two. And from about 12, my teacher gave me, that was actually my second name. My first name was Taiso, which means big trouble, basically. But But the whole point was is that someone who could guide, can be chaotic, but also find the inner truth, the balance. And ice skating was very much that thing. But the point of why I started on this was I'd go ice skating on my own, especially in the latter years. They'd all given up, and I'd say, and people would say, "Oh, who'd you come with?" And I came with me, and you would see like shock in their face. What, you came on your own? Why did you come on your own? But there's people here, you know, what's to be? And people have got this thing, and like you say about the ladies going off there, it's they all go together, and as they fall one by one, they unconsciously, well, you hope unconsciously, start to, you know, push. Oh, like you say, do you want a cream cake? Do you want this? Do you want because there's this natural thing in I failed, so you know that's not fair that you're still there. But that we only have that because in society it's either this or that, one or the other, right or wrong, it's left or right. There's a quick thing I want to sort of say. There's this interesting thing in the story of Star Wars. You have the dark side, you have the light side, and in the actual story, they've got a thing called the Grey Code, and the Grey Code are basically Taoists. They've learned to balance between the two. They follow the light, but they're fully aware of anger, and they're fully aware of the dark side ability. Now, George Lucas sold the idea to Disney, and now what I'm hearing in those, so I'm not a nerd, but I am a nerd of sorts. What I'm hearing about that story is that Disney, it looks like they're going to take out the Grey Code. So this whole, they're only going to show the dark or the light, and it's this constant conflict. In Chinese symbology, what most people call this yin yang, and actually its name is Tai Chi. Tai Chi is supreme harmony. It's the balance between the two. Yin yang would be a line straight down the center, one side totally dark, one side totally light, and basically opposing opposites. I'm right, you're wrong. That's left, that's right. And Western society tends to be in that structure. Things are this or that. You're in one box or the other. So you're either successful or you're not. You're either happy or you're not. You know, you're going to lose weight. Oh, that's awesome. But then if everybody starts dropping off, well, you know, I didn't make it. And like I say, they do things, hopefully unconsciously, to sort of try to change that because they feel bad about themselves. It's like, I was bullied as a kid. I was very much bullied. And one of the ironies was I started doing martial arts as 12, and I was still bullied all the way up to 16 because I didn't believe in fighting back. I was trained in the way of is that I learned how to take a punch. So, you know, they were hitting me and it was having no effect. But the whole point is that because I was different or because I did things a different way, bullies they want to oppose their view onto others. You know, they desperately have their own problems, and this is the biggest thing. This is what taught my daughter Ketra, is that when bullies are bullies because they're desperately trying to not let you see actually what's wrong with them. They're scared. They've had their past traumas, their past issues, and he who shouts loudest shouts the highest. You know, the whole point is that they shout the most, nobody will know their true weaknesses, their true problems. So bullies tend to control people because they don't want to be controlled themselves. Because in the West, we have this thing. You're either being controlled or you're controlled. You're either this or you're that. They have to try to find a box. I've grown up, like I say, I've done martial arts. In the West, martial arts is fighting. Pretty much that's it. Even for those not in the martial arts circle, martial arts is fighting or it's some sort of sport. But they don't understand, like the Bruce Lee context of martial arts is personal development. It's the development of mind, body, and spirit. And we tend to like to stick things in boxes. And you know, even with us, like, you know, like you was listening to your story when you were first talking about your guides, is that, you know, the British concept, the Western concept is, oh, you know, this guide thing, oh no, that's a bit, you know, that's a bit ooky, you know, that's a bit
woo-woo.
Yeah, but very woo-woo. Oh, I'm so you know what people used to say that to me, you say, you know, Boggie, you're very woo-woo. I say, I'm so woo-woo, I'm a train. Woo-woo. I'm a humorist. I play on it, you know, is that I play on words.
Yeah, why not?
But because it's all about fun. And one of the Taoist concepts is about this child, you know, if you become childlike, you're meant to be childlike in the essence of play with stuff. You play with ideas, you be a bit silly, but at the same time, you're an adult because you take responsibility for your actions. So you play like a child, but you take responsibility, but like an adult. But especially in the West, there's this, you know, in Christianity, one of the sayings of, when I'm a child, I play like a child, but when I'm a man, I put away childhood. So, yeah, and you know, but the words they're using, because words are power, words are magic. The words
Absolutely.
they're using, they're saying is that children are not intelligent. Children cannot, you cannot learn from children. One of my favorite Taoist sayings is everyone and everything is your Sifu. So and Sifu doesn't really mean master or teacher. Sifu means muse, means guide, the person that will point you in that direction. And I have learned as much from children as I ever have from any other, from any other human. But, you know, I've learned from trees, I've learned from the sky, I've learned from the wind. Now, in the West, we'd say that as either woo-woo and shamanic. But shamanic is just another word meaning living in nature. We are nature, and you should be living. It's, you know, the whole thing. This is what I love about, like, the Matrix. The Matrix was actually based on Eastern philosophies of Taoism, and the whole thing of the dream concept. Everything is a dream, and everything is information. But if everything is information, that means you can learn from everything. You pick up from everything. And children are far wiser until adults come along and muck them up. We start tampering with, because in the West we say, oh no, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, and then so you get that from adults, and children are so desperate to be adults because they think that's where all the important stuff is. And then when and I've heard this from students and patients as well, they get to adult and they're so desperately to be a child again. And like, the one thing they seem to miss is, why can't you be both? You know, you're an adult, yes, you're an adult, absolutely, you've grown up, but why can't you still be a child? Why can't you still play?
I think kids are so desperate to grow up. I'm going to interrupt for a second and say this before I forget. I think kids are so desperate to grow up because they're not treated with the respect that adults are treated with. There's been case studies done where people have lined up two groups of people and said, this person borrowed something from you, now ask for it back. And one group, they'll say it's a child. Another group, they'll say it's your next door neighbor. Always, 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 always the neighbor gets treated with more respect, more courtesy, and all of that than the kids ever do. And also something that I learned as a parent that I found highly important was I never denied my stepdaughter a truth. I never said you're too young to know about this. As soon as she had been emotionally traumatized by something that had happened in her life, I said, look, I will give you a really, like when we talked about sex. I explained sex to her when she was about 5 years old. I didn't tell her about the details of it. I didn't tell her anything that she didn't need to know. But I explained it to her and said, look, I'll explain the rest of this when you get older, because right now, if I explain this to you, it's going to traumatize you. So there was never any, like, the questioning stage for her of why is it this way went on is still going on today. But there's not this block between us because she knows I will tell her everything that I can tell her. I will give her an answer to any question. I might say, you need to wait to learn the rest of this information until you're ready for it. But that's what, to me, it is. There's a really funny fantasy author named Piers Anthony, and he talks about it as the adult conspiracy that kids are all trying to learn. You know, there's this division between adults and grown-ups, and you don't want to be a kid because you're not going to get to know all the stuff that the grown-ups know. I think that's an awful concept. I think that really we need to be teaching these children. Like for me, when I was a kid, I learned about menstruation when I had an experience with seeing bloody toilet paper, and I learned about it. So for me, it's just such a natural part of my consciousness. There is no triggers, or there is no traumas. There was never any like, ooh, gross. There was just, this is a part of how life works, because it was explained to me as an adult, as a small person. To me, there's the distinction is there's small people and there's kids. Kids are going to be a kid forever. They're never going to grow up. They're always going to be nagging you and pestering you. And then there's little people or small adults that are going to grow up to be big adults. So you sure as fuck better start training them now and get them indoctrinated into a good state of consciousness, because, and this is something that I thought of not that long ago that I found really profound, we are training our teachers, guys. We are training, when we reincarnate, we are training our masters who are going to be there to teach us and to pass on this lineage that we are teaching to our children now. So it's super important to train our next teachers. If you want to be selfish, don't think about the future of the world. Don't think about that child's life. Be selfish. Think about who's going to be training you in your next life. Is this the way you want to be trained? Is this the way that you want to set an example for your children to raise you in the future?
Well,
yeah, I have a connection with that. Sorry.
But, go on.
Yeah, go on, after you.
I was only... Oh, cough now. I was only going to say was, I know even you say about the future, but you don't have, the next life, you don't have to go to that too far, because when you're talking about your own kids, they're the people that, in the ancient cultures, they're the people that looked after you when you got old. So therefore, if you treated them bad, they will treat you bad in the future. And that was the whole Cat Stevens' "Cat in the Cradle" song. Cats in the Cradle. That was the whole thing about, he never had time for his child, and then when his child became an adult, his adult son never had time for him, and it's the whole cause and effect. So you don't even have to look too woo-woo into the future and think about the next life. Is that those people, or as a friend used to say, is treat your kids well, because they'll be sorting out which retirement home you go to. It's you got to think of, you look after the people who eventually will look after you. And this is why in India and Africa, well, especially in India in Hinduism, but also in the East, in China, is that there's this great respect of your grandparents, because they brought you into this world. You should have respect for them, because they've hopefully guided you right. And if they didn't guide you right, it's your turn not to guide them as in control them, but it's your turn to pay back necessarily what they didn't do, but guide them better than they guided you. And the whole thing, the word Sifu, in Japanese philosophy, sensei is very much master. It's very much, I'm at the top, you're at the bottom, and you do what I say. There is the great respect, but the master always knows. Sifu is more like, hopefully what good parents are like, is that I want my children to do better than me. I want them to be to be smarter or whatever they want to do. I want them to succeed and grow. And even as a teacher, as a student, as a Sifu, it's the same thing with my students. I'm happy if they advance far more than I do. I want them to go off and learn with other people, because they're me, and that's the Tao, that's the way. So I should want that. But in certain societies or certain people, is that, oh no, I'm always the master, I'm always the teacher, and you're this and I'm that, and it's this separation. So it's about just balancing off. So sorry, Tony, what were you going to say?
Well, it's kind of linked with this, and it also goes back to children. There's a missionary went to Australia, and he went to the Aborigines children, and he wants to teach them to play football. Okay, but what's happened is they wouldn't score a goal. Saying, well, why should I beat this person? Because of it. And the missionary got really frustrated, okay, because this is separation in a big way. And that's a good example of how misinterpretation we have of life, you know, is that we must beat people. That's always separation. And, you know, good, you know, but if it gets serious, if it's no fun in it, then it's actually competition. And competition for the sake of it, then I think it's separation myself.
Yeah, I totally agree. I wanted to throw out a great quote about raising children. I'm probably going to misquote it slightly, but it's by Khalil Gibran, I believe is the pronunciation of his name. He's a poet. And he says basically to the effect of, parents are the bows from which we loose the arrows, which are our children, out into the world to fly as far away and true and straight as we possibly can, so that way they can have the best future that they possibly can. You know, like my mom homeschooled me. At one point, I have an older brother. My mom was homeschooling 2 boys without any financial help from my dad. My dad had left. And she was so adamant about her desires to homeschool me and my brother, because my mom is dyslexic and she's in her late 60s now. So when she was growing up, she tried to count on her fingers and got like serious trouble in school for trying to count on her fingers. Well, there's pictures of Einstein counting on his fingers, you know, touching on the whole like Boggie's whole spider graph experience. Is that, you know, the same thing. So that's why my mom homeschooled me, where she recognized, oh, my son's dyslexic. I'm not going to make him go through that. So I'm going to save him from that. But at one point, she was a single mom raising 2 kids. She was involved in, I think, 9 legal battles in 11 years. A bunch of them were about me because I had a speech impediment and I was a mess as a kid. But she was so powerfully committed to that role of the hero in her life, of the hero, in this case being the mother, who's sacrificing all for the sake of her quest. That, I mean, she had all sorts of health problems that she still hasn't recovered from. I'm 30 now, you know, but she felt so passionately about her desire to raise children in this way that she sacrificed all for her children. And that's very yin and mother element, is that sacrificing for your child. But you don't see that. We're not trained in that. Our society doesn't encourage that anymore with the true intent of sacrifice. Because to me, there's sacrifice. There's like, throw yourself in front of this car for no reason, or do your best to save someone regardless of what happens to you. There's that distinction. It's kind of like with all things, the older I get, the more I realize that every moment is simply about discernment, because there are moments where these rules are great, like societal rules. There's moments where societal rules are fantastic and we absolutely need them to keep order. But then there's moments where it's very important to break those societal rules for your own well-being. But having the discernment to understand what is the proper timing for both, discernment is not taught. I think at this point, the 2 greatest things that I lament in the world is the lack of daily practices. Because I know a lot of spiritual people who go to like a spiritual gathering once every like 3 or 4 months, and that's their spiritual life, you know. And the rest of the times, because that creates separation, because you got your normal life, and then you got your spiritual life, and there's no meshing of the 2. You know, your spiritual when you go out and stay in the woods at a festival and have a bonfire, that's your spiritual time. But what that's not saying about the rest of the time is really important to me. Like, I've always been a really strangely dressed person because I was allowed to dress myself ever since I was a kid. So you can imagine dyslexic, autistic, homeschool kid is allowed to dress himself. Things are going to get a little weird. I used to really love Halloween, and then I heard a talk by someone who had a physical disability, and he was saying how he doesn't like Halloween. And his thing about Halloween is, because we have one day of the year where we're supposed to get dressed up, what's that actually saying about the rest of the year? That's saying that you shouldn't get dressed up. The subliminal message that's not being said is you shouldn't be getting dressed up. I say should. you shouldn't be getting dressed up. You ought to look normal the rest of the year because you have this one day where it's societally acceptable. And it always used to really irk me that people would be much more open to me and be more friendly with me when I was wearing the same clothes that I wore all year round. On Halloween, people liked my costume on Halloween. But the rest of the time, people wouldn't talk to me or make eye contact with me. So again, that gets into like what's really not being said here. Because to me, that's one of the most important things, is what's not being said. Like when you listen to people talk, I'm a really big fan of listening to people talk and see how they like to dole out responsibilities for other things. Like I had this friend who said to me once, you know, my dog needs to get better at waking me up in the morning so I can meet my dog's needs better. Well, what if you got better at getting up in the morning? What if you got better at listening for your dog? And then it wouldn't be your dog's responsibility anymore. But we're trained in that way to shift off, oh, it's not my fault, it's somebody else's. It's not my fault that I'm sick, it's the government's fault. It's the corporation's fault. It's God's fault. You know, one of my favorite quotes ever is, and then man created the devil because he just couldn't own up for his own shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so anyway, I circle around. So the discernment ultimately is the thing that can't be taught because it's situational specific. You can't teach someone. You can teach someone to always be good, but good is such a loose and general and open to interpretations term that people don't know how to apply it in their lives. People don't have the understanding of the separation, of the intelligence, of the awareness that it takes to differentiate between the Buddha and the monkey in every situation. So they're trying to, you know, we think of life as like this thing. We don't acknowledge death. You know, life's forever, right? Because lifetime warranties, and we don't acknowledge age and death and all of that stuff. So with that consciousness in mind, it's all part of the, you know, you're either alive or dead. There's no separation. So there's no distinguishing, there's no discernment. There's no deeper awareness, which is discernment in every moment. In monitoring your consciousness in every moment, in trying to be aware of your thoughts in every moment, and being conscious of your body in every moment. You know, you've got TV to numb your mind, you've got sugar to numb your nervous system, you've got fear to keep you going, and then you're presented with 1,000 choices. There's been a lot of interesting research done on decision making, where the greatest example that I know of is they did this experiment where they had this store that had a lot of kinds of jelly, and they had 12 kinds of jelly on the samples. And like 1 in 6 people bought one, I think was the number. But then they brought it down to 4, so there's only 4. And 1 out of like 3 people bought one. And what that inevitably proves, and I see this, and I believe this is very much a form of control, is that humans can only make so many decisions a day, right? Our consciousness can only handle so many decisions. Ultimately, if we were living in a tribe, you wouldn't have to handle, the amount of knowledge that is required to live in a small tribe is significantly less, because you don't need to learn how to be a healer on your own. You don't need to learn how to be a diet. You don't need to learn about your diet on your own. You don't need to, because you're just going to do this one job, and there's going to be somebody there to go, hey, your energy's out of alignment. Or the other person who's going to come up to you and go, hey, you're not eating properly. So because we have to learn all of these things on our own, that takes up so much of our cognizance. That takes up so much of our thinking. And then, like, for me, what I've noticed is, like, how many kinds of potato chips are there? A lot more than when I was a kid, and I guarantee it's a lot more than when you were a kid, Tony. So, you know, how much time are humans thinking about what kind of fucking potato chip they should get? Yeah, this is part of the control that we see in society, in my opinion. Is it used to be you go, you salt the land. The Romans had this down. You salt the land, so they got to get their food from you, and you destroy their libraries, so you destroy knowledge. Thanks to the internet, you can't destroy knowledge. So what do? You overload people with knowledge. You put in so much sensory input that people spend all their time deciding what kind of chips and soda and ice cream they want to have, because there's a whole fucking aisle devoted to it, instead of thinking about world events, life situations, what's going on in this relationship. They're thinking about, should I have ranch or barbecue potato chips? And then, and then you see the fear that people have because they're so overwhelmed. And then my understanding of mind control is It's to induce fear and present an easy, applicable solution that will save people from that fear. Because I know when I'm in pain, I'll do stuff that I wouldn't ordinarily do. Like I'll take prescription medicine if I'm in horrible pain. Sure. The rest of the time, there's no fucking way I'm putting that junk in my body. But if I'm in enough pain, I'm going to do it in a heartbeat, because pain is the motivator. Pain is there to teach you things. Pain is the greatest teacher in life. Oh, Boggie, I'm going to say that quote and then I'm going to shut up. So the quote that I think Boggie's talking about is something: life comes up to you with a feather tickle. And if you go, no, and you ignore the feather tickle, then it comes back and it pokes you. If you ignore that poke, then it comes back and with a brick. And then it comes back with diabetes or cancer or whatever disease you manifested, because you didn't listen when the universe came up and said, hey, listen. No. I'm playing my Xbox. I think that's a gaming system. An Xbox. I don't play video games. Yeah, I'm playing my Xbox. I don't have time for you right now. So I'm going to end my rant there, I think.
Well, it's all I mean, you did right, of course. But all these electrics around us, we don't know what some of the messages are coming through them anyway. But not only have we got television, and Facebook and all that, but we've all got, it's open to anything to come through to us. There's no limit to how we can be affected. And this is where it pays to be slightly different in life, so that we can going. There was a book I've just read. It's about two magicians, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, it's called.
Okay.
The new novel, about 1,000 pages, one of the best books I read. And it's these two magicians, and they can maneuver countries even, towns. And so they're getting to a really tight spot, and then there's this dark energy behind. So this one magician decides, I know what I can do. I can go mad. So they can't do anything about that, you see. I'm just going to go mad. They're going to go mad, you see. And that, sometimes you've just got to think out of the box with these things. Then there's no, that whole system of control, because this is the whole purpose of all these organizations, governments or whatever, is to control, say, hey, let's give some fear, then I'll look after you. You'll be all right while you stick to these rules. You know that. I know that. So this is the thing. So you've got to go out the box. You've got to go completely crazy at times, or go somewhere different that will surprise everyone. That's the way out of it, really.
Yeah. The way out is the direction that nobody sees and nobody expects.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they would shit for it. They would have set a booby trap for you. Like according to the United States government, I'm learning disabled. So like they've set the booby trap there for me. Like they set up a nice system that I can't work in because my learning style is different than the school systems. They tried to, I didn't learn how to read really until I was about 12 or 13. So the United States government was going to force me to go to school because I couldn't read. My mom took on the state that I live in, which is Oregon. She took on the learning board in Oregon and sued them and won, actually. So I had my homeschooler's tests read to me. I was the first kid in all of Oregon, maybe even the United States, to have someone sit there and read the test, because I knew the information. I knew what I was supposed to know according to the government. I couldn't read the questions they were asking me to write down the right answers, but I knew my stuff. So they'll try and take you out, man. I would have been a Ritalin kid. I was of the right generation when Ritalin hit. I had all of the symptoms of Ritalin that they would have prescribed for me if I had been in school. I had a speech impediment too. I had the Elmer Fudd, the WR replacement. Took about 2.5 years of speech pathology to get rid of that. So I would have been in special needs. I had anger problems when I was a kid. I would have been in a wreck, because society's built. Society figure out, these are the ones that are going to be able to go outside the box and look around, so we'll take them out at the knees so they can't stick their head out of the box.
Yeah.
And I was blessed to have a mom who was just willing to put up with me.
That sounds amazing. Amazing woman.
Yeah, definitely. She's a trooper. So yeah, I mean, even society has even like programmed it. It's like that whole thing of I grew up with chickens, raising chickens. They were our friends. We didn't butcher them or anything. You know, I had my chicken who I loved very dearly. And you see something I learned from chickens is that pecking order. You know, it's like it's like masculinity. How amazingly proficient has society got it down that if you act in a feminine manner, so if you actually honor being a man and, you know, acknowledge the feminine within you, the rest of the men will pick on you, demoralize you, make you out to be weak. All of these things. Society doesn't even have to do anything. It's programmed that if you stick your head up as a man and say, I feel slightly feminine, there's this automatic pecking frenzy that where all the other manly men in the group just go for you and go after you. That's why I've always found it very profound to be. I have a lot of male friends who are gay because they've had to survive that. They've had to step back from that pecking order, realize who they are as a being, and overcome that deep-seated programming that society has put in them. So I find far much more acceptance and closeness of love and relationships with people who are gay because they've been ostracized from the community and they've survived the I don't know the word, ostracization.
Yeah.
The what?
Yeah.
Ostracization.
Yes, that's the one. Thanks, Boggie. Because they've survived that and lived through it. There are generally, of course, you know, discernment in all situations because there's always people there who will go against what the norm is. But you find so much more love and acceptance from these people because they've been through this experience where the program that everybody's living in, where people are programmed to attack each other, they've survived it and they've come through it and they've risen above it. So it's kind of like, you know, you go to a carnival, you must be this tall to ride on the ride. That's how, in my mind, how it is. If you're gay, this means you have to be at least this tall in your consciousness to have survived and not manifested a disease for yourself with your programming that you grew up with.
But there's that thing.
There is.
I'll just quickly go. Never mind. There's that thing where, well, it's still struggling, but there's that thing where if you were a man and you were feminine, you must be gay. You know, if you had you know, you embraced your feminism. Oh, well, you must be gay because you're embracing your female side because that box teaches that. And, you know, it's one of those, and like the side of that is that even in the weird circles, you know, the goths, the punks, you still had to be in that box. You couldn't be both. You couldn't, you know, one of the biggest things growing up, as you know, an ice skater that did Tai Chi, that was weird. A Tai Chi practitioner that ice skated and played hockey, that was weird. That was, you can't be very spiritual. You know, well, one of my biggest things with people who say, I don't believe in spirituality, it's a load of believe in it. I'll quote psychology, I'll quote NLP, I'll quote, especially my favorite is I'll quote quantum physics. Is that, you know, the whole reason in science, the whole reason we have blind case studies that were back in the day of the Einstein, the day when Einstein was about, back in that day when they were doing the atom experiments and they were messing around with the small, they found that the observer affects the experiment. That was back then, and then you got the whole placebo effect. So when people say, "Oh, I don't believe in this," it's like, well, you know, well, actually, science says this, this, and this for starters, and then also is that, or somebody said, you know, I have no problem with any faith whatsoever, but when somebody says, "Oh, I don't believe in God," you know, I'm an atheist. So you believe in the atheism then? That's your religion. That's your belief. No. But no, that's what you believe. Is that, you know, because you can't say it is or it isn't, because even though, you know, again, I go back to science, and there were scientists that tried to disprove God. Spent 30 years. There's still some are still doing it, but there was a group of scientists that tried to disprove God, and there's a book about it. I can't remember the book's name, but most of those scientists either went from atheist to not sure, or they actually eventually chose a religion because they basically said, God is playing tricks on me, that I've tried to disprove on an atomic level that God didn't exist, and yet I found instead that quarks, which are a part of an atom, so that's, you know, now they're not even the smallest thing, but they're part of an atom. They were saying that quarks and particles within an atom contain some sort of consciousness. What? But what? Consciousness as in they think for themselves? Yeah. Well, yeah. And it did their heads in that, you know, that space, this stuff, the particles actually had some sort of consciousness. They could be affected. And then, like I say, with the Einstein thing, is that, you know, each of them said this certain thing was going to happen, and they were all right. And they said, well, how can that be possible? Okay, we do each other's experiments, and they proved their own selves what they believed was going to happen with the technique of the other person. They proved themselves right, and it boiled down to this whole thing of, in the whole reason of blind case studies is because the observer affects the experiment, and that's not even touching the whole point that in a particle, 99.9% of it is nothing but empty space. So scientifically, it's very pseudo at the moment, but scientifically, the universe is a hologram, because 99.9% of everything around you that you touch, taste, hear, and smell is all holographic. And the mind twist of that is that you can't know it's a holograph because you're in the hologram. You know, you're the dreamer in the dream. So how do you know you're dreaming? But anyway, that's probably going off subject. But
well,
go on.
We're the point. What it points to that we are the creator of everything in our lives. So where we put our focus, then, you know, on that same theme. So there was a comedian I saw in the States, and he said, "You can look back, but don't stare."
I love it.
Yeah.
Because most people are staring and staring, and they're saying, what's gone wrong in their life, what happened, and they go back to the child, they go over all the bad things, so there for the rest of their lives. Instead of
that's why it's called His Story.
Yes.
His story.
That's true.
Yeah, it's like Ethan's other words. Dis-ease.
Dis-ease, yes.
But dis-ease. And that's very much, well, you need Tony on the healing side. That's very much, you know, you're out of balance. You're not, you know, oh, I'm ill. No, you're out of balance. You know, I'm going to die. No, you're out of balance. You know, you're just out of balance. If you focus on it as being out of balance, then subconsciously, well, if I'm out of balance, that means I can be in balance. You know, it's not as if you focus on the illness, you'll just be more ill. Whatever you focus on grows. You know, and that's where, you know, it's just, I think one of our, as a healer or a shaman or whatever you want to call it, banana man, one of your biggest things for me, when I say one of my biggest things is not actually healing and helping people. It's a vital thing, but one of my biggest things is actually education. Is, you know, breaking that mold society's made. Re-educating people is I say it a lot, and you said it, you know, right then, was you are your creator. I repeat, you are your creator. You know, it is, because like people would say with me, you know, oh, do you believe in God? Yeah, I am God, and so are you, and so are you, and so is this bottle, and so is this water. And of course, when you say it that way, if you say, yes, I am God, oh, you're crazy, I can fit you in a nice little box because you're saying you're God. But when you turn around and say, you're God, no, boom, head explodes. You know, the whole fact is educating, but also educating the educator. You know, don't attack people's philosophies. Get a mirror, get them to look. Let's break down what is the isms, what is right and what is wrong for you. Because, you know, if your way, for me, if your system is working and if you're happy and balanced and you know everything's well, you're healthy in mind, body and spirit, then I don't care if that's putting a banana on your head every day and putting cod liver oil in your ear, or believing that the Marshmallow Man is the supreme being. If that works for you, cool. I don't, you know, is that I'm not here to convert people. I'm just here to help them find their own balance. Because my Tao is my Tao, and it works for me. And I'm not saying everything I do works for other people, but my goal, my key, is to help you find what works for you. So I can offer you some stuff, but if the stuff that I offer doesn't interest you, I'll point you in the direction of somebody else, and that's the point. But educating people is that you are your own creator, you are your own facilitator, you are your own guide and muse, and also, you know, like with the health stuff, you're your own doctor. Is that the whole thing of Qigong and Tai Chi? One of the biggest things is with the exercises, they call you a practitioner because you practice them yourselves. You using the practices, you can maintain balance. Of course, you know, it's a little bit like in the old days when cars were actually cars and not basic computers. The old days of like, you know, certain people, they would be the mechanic for their own car. They'd look after their own car, but you know, on certain things they would take you to a mechanic. So you self-regulated on certain things, you know, like you were, or at least in England, you know, you had to check your oil and water, and you had to do certain things. And some people went a bit further than that. But the whole point is you regulated, you maintained. A lot of it was down to you. In society, I'm ill, go and see a doctor. I'm mentally disturbed, go and see a psychiatrist. You know, they're putting the focus, the blame onto somebody else to sort it out for you, where we should be actually going, okay, oh, I've got to do it myself. I need help, but I still got to do it myself.
Well, that all gets into the schooling system too. I think that the schooling system, from my experience and from the things I've seen, which keep in mind, I have a very different experience than most people do. The schooling system is all about, and I've caught this consciousness in my own life and how it manifests. We're trained to be able to present ourselves to a higher power, because you have this test that you have to take. You have this thing that you have to be able to show that you have knowledge about. So you see people, and I've caught this in my own life, and I believe this is why you see another side of Facebook that I think has some really insightful things. Facebook is an amazing teacher, by the way, everybody. If you look at the greater trends of consciousness and you look at the greater things that Facebook says that it's not actually saying, like how everybody wants recognition for the things they're doing. Now there's self-recognition of like, hey, I'm doing this thing. It's becoming empowering for me. I appreciate this and it's good. And it's good for me. And then there's the other form of recognition of like the people who post something and then it doesn't get enough likes. So they get upset about it. It doesn't have the response that they want when they present themselves to their perceived higher power, which is, in this case is Facebook. And they are saying, aren't I good enough? Because you're trained, because if you're always asking everybody else around you if you're good enough, then that means that you're not going to come to a sense of peace with yourself, because enlightened people make really awful slaves. Really terrible slaves are made of enlightened people and conscious people. So you gotta make sure that you don't get that going on too much. So you make sure that they have, and I speak from my own experience of not going to school and still having this consciousness that I'm aware of in this program or this virus that I'm conscious of and I'm consciously working on eradicating, of this desire, like when you have a success, there's the natural desire to share it with the people you love. And that's its own thing that I'll talk about in a second. But ultimately it's that, like, we're all running around, we're trained to all run around and look for people to say, you did such a good job. Even though it has no actual reference to you personally, it has no significance to you personally. And the other thing that I was going to say a second ago about sharing things that I think is really important for people, and I was a rough lesson for me. Let's take exercise, for example. I'm a big exercise enthusiast. I get excited about getting new pieces of gym equipment. I realize not many other people share this experience. I've tried to share this experience with people, and they haven't enjoyed it. So what I learned, and I learned this also from nonviolent communication, is you share the feeling behind it. You share, like, when I get a new piece of gym equipment now or something, I share with my friends, I'm excited because I got this thing that will help me grow as a being, that I will be able to use to my advantage, and I have wanted this thing for a long time. Everybody understands those things. Now, if I go into this long thing about, oh, I got this special piece of gym equipment and it lets me do this and this and this, everyone's going to glaze over. Nobody's going to want to hear it. I'm going to be everyone's just going to be like, oh, great, he's fucking talking about gym equipment again. Ugh. But if you can connect to the need and the basic human experience that we all share when it comes to sharing any experience, like, you know, I don't want to hear the stupid thing the stupid story about the adorable thing that your dog did. I want to hear about how that stimulated you to feel happy, about how that stimulated you to feel full of life and love and laughter for this little being that you have this relationship to. That is profound and amazing. Telling me that your kid made a soccer goal at his last soccer game, I don't give a flying fuck about. Or a regular fuck, or any kind of fuck at all. I mean, whether it's biped, whatever, doesn't matter. I'm not interested. But I am interested in that experience that you're having of that deeper feeling tone that I can actually relate to instead of this mental construct that you're doing.
Yeah,
and to me, that is a profound way of thinking. Please continue.
I mean, you've heard this saying, people forget what we said, people forget what we did, but people will never forget feel.
True. Very true.
And
because we speak in feelings, we speak in emotions.
Yes.
Everything else is just drivel that goes on top. But ultimately, we're trying to convey. And ultimately, another thing that is very profound for me that I learned from nonviolent communication is trying to figure out what your need is. Like, I'm angry. What need of mine is going unmet? Am I feeling unsafe? Am I feeling that this person is doing something that is harmful to me?
Yeah.
And when you can come to that state, it really, really helps, because I know that I have problems with judging myself. It really helps with judging yourself with, why did I yell at this person? Well, I yelled at this person because I didn't feel safe. And I didn't feel safe because this reminded me of something bad that happened to me as a child. So it's much easier to find compassion for yourself, because I feel that compassion for the self is one of the things that a lot of people who are really spiritual are good at, being compassionate towards others. But when it comes to being compassionate towards themselves, it's no good. Oh, and also, I'm going to say this and then I'll shut up again. You were talking about, Boggie was talking about the subcultures and you know, oh, either you're a goth or you're a punk or this, that, and the other. I have been observing many subcultures for a long time because I don't exactly fit in any subcultures. I have a lot of friends who are hippies, but I also have friends who all over the place. I even have like rich Republican friends who are probably going to vote for Trump because I connect with them and I see their inner beauty and I can push the things I don't agree with aside. So I see a lot of exclusion happening, like in the hippie community. You know, the hippie community is one of those things, they're supposed to be all about light and love and all that. If you put like a stiff, snooty guy in a suit in front of them, they're going to be just as derisive, just as sarcastic, just as degrading as everybody else is, because they still are having that basic human judgment. And what makes it even worse, I've heard it called boomeritis, is that extreme spirit, like I'm so holy that I've got it all figured out. You know, when the discernment ceases, when people think they no longer need discernment in every moment of that, like, oh, you're a Republican, or, you know, whatever, you're working for some evil pipeline, or whatever the current motif of the day is, instead of recognizing that person is just a person who has unmet needs and is, one of my favorite expressions, a suicidal expression of an unmet need. You know, because that's what it is. Like when somebody reaches out in violence, that's a suicidal expression of an unmet need, because ultimately I'm sure that if that person was aware of what their needs were and were able to be compassionate for themselves, I don't think that violence would be a problem like that. I don't think that gun control, it needs to happen at all. I think that people need to accept their feelings and not be trained to blame other people and punish people. It's like 90% of films and television that's shown during the peak hours of viewing, the bad guy either is punished by getting beaten up or killed. 90%. So myths train us how to behave. Myths train us how to think. Myths train us because it activates the left hemisphere of your brain. That's why Native Americans teach in myth. That's why the Bible teaches in parable. That's why it's so powerful. Myths are now television. Myths are now movies. The problem is the people who are making these are not interested in our greater well-being, are not interested in learning and expansion. They are interested in control and money and emotional stimulus, which is why it's getting more violence, more sex, more drugs, more all that stuff.
Just very quickly, this is like my point when I said about the Star Wars. You know, the original story has this third way. You know, a third way of being, the grey code.
Totally.
Disney, it sounds like they're going to cut this out. And of course, well, there's an old act. I used to love acting in school, and well, I actually went to the theatre and whatnot. But you know, an actor on the stage, you can muck up a line, but the audience hasn't got a clue. As long as you don't go, oh damn, I forgot the line. You know, if you just carry on.
Yes.
The audience hasn't got a clue. And the same in martial arts. They say in martial arts when demos, you can muck up. As long as you keep going, nobody else is going to know that you mucked up. So the whole fact is that they'll take this information out. They won't show that whole path. And yet, you know, nobody else will know. But it will fit the whole right and wrong, the this and that, good versus evil. They won't, you know, they won't see this side, and you know, it goes along. There's certain stories, or this is what I love about watching movies about the director's cut. You know, you get a director's cut of a movie that some of these are so different from the original. You go, what the heck? You know, it's basically another movie, but you know, and there's this thing in life. We're so thinking about the boxes, what I call politics, you know, politics with a B. And the whole thing in life, even in spirituality, you get certain people, oh no, he's a pagan, or he's a this, he's a that, or she's a this, you know, and they do it, you know, don't think Tai Chi and Taoism is any different. In the West, especially, you have, oh, my Tai Chi is better than your Tai Chi. This is better than that. When you read the classics, and I learned this in theology. When you read the books themselves, the cause of each religion, they all pretty much say the same thing. You know, God is the biggest thing. One of my little things I play with is that when you read in the Old Testament and you read it from, well, somebody read it to me who did Hebrew. One of the Old Testament, the line is, everybody knows that God created man in his own image. The actual translation says God created everything in its own image.
Oh,
now,
totally.
of course, that line is totally different to the first one, because firstly, well, how can God create everything? How can everything be the image of God? And of course it starts the ball roll, because that's the point. They want you to think that everything is one. But then what happens in religions, so the books themselves have virtually, you know, very similar or the same truths, and they want you to be open, they want you to be compassionate, and they want you to blend. But then what happens, people get in the way, you know, the versions of bishops and or, you know, leaders in those religions, and they start manipulating the information that suits them best. And this is what happens with all this other stuff, you know, with spirituality. We talk about love and peace, and you said it nicely, Ethan, where you get people to say, oh yeah, I'm all love and peace, but I hate the corporates, you know, I hate this, I hate. Hold up. If you're all about love and peace, and you're all about community, then you can't hate. You know, like one of the biggest things for me, education, one of the biggest things very, very quickly is that people say about how everything is wrong. This is wrong, that's wrong. Okay, cool. Yes, you should see what's wrong, but you should actually spend far more time focusing on how you're going to make it right than what's wrong. And one of the biggest, in society's evil, society's controlling things. Yeah, but buy your own land, make it totally self-sufficient, and they can't do anything about it if you call it's a religious community. So there are ways around these things. Stop trying to fight the system. Become the system. Become your own system. Learn how to adapt to that.
You can go out and you can protest McDonald's and stand in front of McDonald's and march around and make a big deal about how evil McDonald's are, or you can not eat it, and you can. And you can, I had this experience not that long ago. My ex and I split up, and I moved in with this friend of mine who ate white people food. I don't eat white people food. I eat food, so I don't eat processed food or anything like that. And lo and behold, she didn't like to cook, so I started cooking, and now she only buys organic food because she tasted the difference. I didn't have to go around going, this food is terrible for you, this food will give you cancer, this food will kill you. I just said, here, try this. Here, try this. Yeah. Because it's just that easy to win. I mean, winning, yes, ultimately winning, losing, blah, blah, blah. Duality that you can be put aside. And it's not, ultimately, when it comes down to it, resistance creates resistance because we're all drawn to whatever we're drawn to. That's why angry people run into angry people, and their anger sparks off of their anger has its own relationship and then explodes from there. If you want to change the world, that's why Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world, because ultimately it's not going to I'm not saying that whistleblowers aren't important. I'm not saying that it's not important to be aware of the horrible things that are happening in the world. I don't watch the news. I unfollow people on Facebook who share things about the news because I grew up, my mom read me Howard Zenn's People's History of the United States, which for those of you who don't know is a very, very brutal and graphic book, honestly graphic, not over the top graphic, about the people's history of the United States. So Native American accounts of the Trail of Tears. Christopher Columbus's priest, his personal entries in his journal, which are a lot less biased than the history books are. So I grew up being aware, there's some horrible shit that's going down in this world. I don't need to look at it every day. I don't need to affirm it every day by looking on the news and saying, yep, the world's still horrible.
As Tony said,
I will be able to hold a higher, happier vibration in myself, and I will be able to then go out and be a happier, lighter person. Because if I watch the news in the morning, I'm not going to want to go out and smile at everybody I see. I'm going to be like, fuck, the world's fucked. We're all going to die. The world's over. But I choose to have the discernment to set that aside. And as a result, I can be a happier, brighter person that is then going around and inspiring people to eat organic food. And everything that implies, along with my roommate eating organic food, I just helped chickens to be treated more humanely because she's now eating organic chicken instead of non-organic chicken. I just did a myriad of things just by living my truth. And ultimately, when you live your truth, the universe will open to you in ways that it won't open to anybody else because that's your truth. And when you're in alignment with your truth, then you're in alignment with divine truth. And divine truth, for those of you who don't know, in standard muscle testing, you ask the person who's asking is asking in divine truth because it's one of the purest ways to get the clearest answer, because divine truth and the light are one. Shadow misconceptions exist in the realm of shadow. There can be no misconceptions when the realm of light gets high enough, which gets into vibration, which gets into beings like Jesus. Jesus was a being who had an incredibly high light signature to the point where he was able to transcend the lower vibrations of this earth. That's ultimately like cancer is a very low vibration. Cancer is unconsciousness. Cancer is a cell that forgot its purpose, forgot its life, forgot what God put it here to do. So you see cancer prevalent in the entire world because the entire world is forgetting what it's supposed to be doing. You see diabetes prevalent in the entire world. Diabetes is, from my understanding of the way that you operate, Tony, diabetes is the lack of sweetness in life. You lose the sweetness in life. I have a list that my mom printed off when she was in her 20s in massage school, before massage school became like a thing, you know, back when it was still like basically nobody was doing it. I have the old photocopied list from like 40 years ago that says, you know, this is what's wrong with you. This is your emotional issue that you're having. So, you know, there's a lack of sweetness in life. So you see that manifesting all over the world as well. And another thing that this reminds me of is Mother Nature is, the cruelty of Mother Nature is Mother Nature's compassion. Those of you who watch the show have heard me blather about this repeatedly. So Mother Nature's form of compassion is when an animal becomes too sick, rather than making that animal go through the entire death experience, like let's take, for example, someone who has a pet dog or a pet cat. They're going to probably keep that animal alive a lot longer than spirit originally intended, because nothing happens that spirit doesn't intend, I believe. So originally spirit intended for these beings to have their lives end earlier, so they're in less chronic pain. So there's less chronic suffering. Now you see that also manifest in the form of 90% of the world has an internal fungal infection and or parasite infection. Fungus and parasites are Mother Nature's cleanup crew. You don't live in alignment with Mother Nature, you're not doing your job, she's gonna come clean your ass up. And that looks like a fungal infection or a parasite infection. So you can, it's like this great funny thing that I see in the world all the time is like people think they can argue with the laws of physics. They can argue with the laws of Mother Nature. Like, no, you might want to think that you can get away with smoking your cigarettes your whole life, but no, it actually is bad for you. Mother Nature doesn't care about your perception in this one. She's just gonna, you know, she's just gonna keep on going. I don't remember where I was going with this. I should probably stop talking then. Compassion in the form of violence is an amazingly underrated, misunderstood, and traumatized thing by all of the violence that's happening in the world that is not a part of that sacred violence, that is that violence having fallen out of balance, in my opinion.
It's all to do with separation.
Yes, absolutely. The separation from the way that Mother Nature intended us to live, the separation from the consciousness that we're intended to live in. Even Western science doesn't talk about this. Boggie, you should know about this. In Western science, there's two kinds of thinking. It's called like type A or type B. And type A is, I think, blaming, and type B is like more of an enlightened consciousness. Type A people who have that style of thinking, Western science has finally proven that those people are more likely to have heart problems. Those people are more likely to have heart attacks.
Yeah. Well,
you know, I mean, we know this as a spiritual community because obviously your heart's closed, your heart's got problems, it's your heart. So it's going to get fucked up. I mean, simple wisdom is always the clearest. And
True.
The fact that Western medicine is like, you know, getting on board with it. There's Thor, in the movie Thor, there's a line, I can't remember what Thor it's from, but there's a great line about, for them, the line is basically saying that science and magic are the same thing. They've evolved to the point where science and magic is the same. And I really feel like that's where our society is heading. Because ultimately, when people make films, they're drawing on the collective unconscious, so they're ultimately drawing on what's going on around them and the projections of the future. So you can kind of see that traced by the signs of the times. And I think that there's a lot of really great examples of that being manifest. And also, Boggie, I wanted to say real quick about the whole acting thing is movies and plays are a form of subtle manipulation. They have it down to the point where they can control your emotions through the music. They're controlling your emotions through the music. They're controlling you through the emotional stimulus they're putting out. Like, it's easiest to point it out in Star Trek because so many people make a joke out of it, but it's like the guy in Star Trek who you've never seen before who goes to the planet so they can kill him off because they need to be able to up the stakes to keep you interested. You look at any of the new Marvel movies, there is one character who you get kind of emotionally attached to who they can kill off halfway through so that way you can have some sense of the being that you're associating with, the good guy who you're associating with is now being threatened. He is now in danger, and not only that, but the bad guy killed someone that you liked. I think the clearest example was in, I don't know if anyone's seen it, Ant-Man. Ant-Man, for those of you who aren't familiar with this particular mythos of comic book land, is a guy who can shrink down really small and he can control ants. He has a specific ant that he rides who dies halfway through the movie. And it is 100% to get that hook into your being. And if you've ever read any Barbara Brennan books, or even Google Barbara Brennan images, because she has illustrations in her books, that is an actual style of energetic interaction that people have, where they actually send out energetic hooks into your energy field to grab onto your energy field to try and control you and manipulate you. So movies are doing this too. It's all horribly well thought through and horribly well constructed. So the gray code would introduce a lack of conflict, which is not what people want to see. People are not going to the movies to see the whole world at peace and getting along, because that's not what people are trained to have stimulate their nervous system. And at the end of the day, nervous system stimulation, when you're emotionally and physically shut down and your body's full of poisons, that's the last thing you've got that reminds you of being human. That is the sex, the violence, the drugs. That's the only way that people can feel human anymore. And since, like I said earlier, we're all on that kick of, we all secretly know our life purpose and the divine and what it's like to be in touch with the divine. And since so many of us are out of touch with it, we're all in agony trying to find our way back.
Agreed.
So
right. We need to wrap it up. Yes. So echo. So Tony, are there any more anything else you'd like to say before the end of your show?
No, I've been very happy listening to you both and talking, and I appreciate the conversation. It's very much.
It's been a pleasure. I tell my friends this, and I'll say this on the radio show. I really feel blessed to be a part of this radio show, because I live in a kind of monk-like existence. I work a lot, and I'm very isolated from the spiritual community where I live, and it's amazing because every week I get to meet some new, incredibly cool spiritual person. It's like they're dropped in my lap. Usually I have to go to festivals and seek people out and all this sort of stuff. But it's like every week, Spirit, the divine Tao, brings me this amazing new person that I get to meet. So thank you, Tony, for being the amazing person that I get to meet this week and to share. And there's always such a feeling of love and openness and sharing in these conversations. Of there's not this like, well, this person has to talk because it's their show, and this person, and there's very much this synergy that is repeatedly illustrated to me by the universe and by having these experiences. So thank you for being a part of that.
Thank you. We're all moving here together, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony. But what I want to say, Tony offers consultations in Romsey, near Southampton, which is UK, which, if you don't know, and also offers distance healing service. His telephone number will be put onto this link, and then when I create the other links, I'll do teasers for the show, and also I'll do an edited version where I try to reduce the amount that me and Ethan talk. And I'll put the links, but you can also find Tony on www.energetic.wisdom.co.uk. Again, the links will be on the show once it does its processing and allows me to edit it. I'll put all the links for that on the show. So thank you very much, as always, to Q, the mighty Ethan. Thank you so much, Tony. Great pleasure to have you on the show. Maybe next year you can do it again if we can occur. Oh, brilliant. That's even better. So there wasn't even a shotgun involved. Okay, so right. So thank you very much for the watchers. I know we've only had about 5 or 6 at the moment, but I know I have a lot of American fans that will watch this later. So it ends up within the next 15 hours, I normally have about 50 or 60 people end up watching it, and then over the weeks it does increase. So to those in the future, Hello. Thank you very much. Future people. Thank you very much for watching the show. We have a show next week, and I've forgotten who it is. And I can't remember her full name. I hope she'll forgive me. But anyway, there's another guest for next week. If you look on our Facebook fan page, which is The Way Off Conscious Mindfulness, you will see who's on next week. So thank you very much, Tony. Thank you very much, Ethan. Thank you very much, audience now and audience in the future. Take care. Love, Chi and Shen, Sifu Boggie. Bye.
Bye. Bye.